That old scratched-up piece of iron sitting in the dark corner of your grandpa's gun safe? It is not junk. In fact, it might just buy you a brand new car. Every single day, I see guys making the exact same catastrophic financial mistake. They drag these heavy, dusty relics down to the local pawn shop, thinking they are pulling a fast one by trading them in for some shiny, soulless plastic toy. And that pawn shop owner? He is smiling right to your face while planning to flip your family's inheritance for 5 times what he just handed you. Listen to me very closely. The golden era of forged steel and master-level craftsmanship is dead and buried. Between devastating import bans, legendary American companies going bankrupt, and modern labor costs, the firearms industry will never ever build guns like this again. Tell me, we are living in a plastic world now, which means that heavy metal in your safe is skyrocketing in value. Take the #1 gun on our list today, P. It is an absolute Hollywood icon. Guys used to buy it for a couple $100, realize it kicked like an absolute mule, and dump it back at the used gun counter for pennies. Today, elite collectors are writing blank checks just to get their hands on one. You do not want to be the guy who gave it away. Before we get into it, hit that subscribe button right now. I am here to protect your wallet and your family's hard-earned assets from the sharks in this industry who want to rip you off. Here are 7 guns you should never, ever sell. Coming in at number 7, we have a rifle that most guys completely disrespect to this very day. Like, I am talking about the Russian or the early Sino-Soviet Chinese SKS. Now, I know exactly what is going through your mind right now. You are flashing back to the late 1980s and early 1990s. You remember walking into a local hardware store, a dusty pawn shop, or a weekend gun show and seeing literal wooden crates stacked all the way to the ceiling. Those crates were filled to the brim with these rifles, completely smothered in thick, smelly cosmoline. Back in those days, you could pull an SKS out of a barrel, hand the guy $79, and walk out the door without a second thought. Because they were so incredibly cheap, a massive portion of the gun community treated them like absolute garbage. They viewed them as disposable tools, not real firearms. Guys threw them behind the bench seat of their beat-up pickup trucks and let them bounce around with the jumper cables. They let them rust in damp basements. Or even worse, they committed the ultimate sin. They ripped off that beautiful, historically significant original wood furniture and slapped on some cheap, flimsy, aftermarket plastic tactical stock they bought out of the back pages of a magazine. They threw away the original bayonets and lost the original magazines just to make it look like a modern tactical rifle. If you still have an original, unaltered SKS sitting in the back of your safe, you need to listen to me very carefully. Do not let anyone, especially a guy working behind a used gun counter, convince you that it is just some cheap, outdated surplus junk. One of those days of cheap crates from overseas are dead and gone forever. Devastating import bans and shifting global politics have completely choked off the supply line to the American market. We will never see another boatload of these rifles hit our shores. Because of that absolute drought, the collector's market has completely exploded. We are talking about rifles built with heavy milled receivers and forged steel. These were created in state-run military factories with a level of raw, battle-tested durability that simply does not exist in the commercial market anymore. If you happen to have a Russian Tula factory SKS or an early Sino-Soviet Chinese model where every single serial number on the receiver, the stock, the magazine, and the bolt actually matches, you are sitting on a legitimate gold mine. And I see older guys bringing these into pawn shops all the time, happily accepting $200 in cash because their brain is still permanently stuck in 1993 pricing. They actually think they are pulling a fast one on the dealer. Meanwhile, that exact same pawnbroker is waiting for you to leave so he can turn around and list your historic rifle on an auction site for an easy $800 to $1,200. Do not give away your equity to a middleman. If you have an SKS in its original military configuration, wipe it down, put it back in the safe, and lock the door. It is only going to climb higher. Moving right along to number 6, this one genuinely hurts to talk about because I see it happen every single hunting season, without fail. The pre-1964 Winchester Model 70. Anyway, a lot of you guys watching this probably inherited one of these exact rifles from your father or your grandfather. It has probably got some hard miles on it. The heavy walnut stock might have a few deep scratches from being dragged through the brush, and that beautiful factory bluing might be fading away around the muzzle from decades of honest use. Eventually, you decide to take it down to a modern, brightly lit tactical gun shop. The young kid standing behind the glass counter looks at this historic masterpiece like it is an absolute dinosaur. He is going to tell you that it is way too heavy for modern hunting. He will tell you that you desperately need to trade it in for a brand new, lightweight, synthetic stock rifle sitting on a modern aluminum chassis. He will probably offer you a straight trade, smiling the whole time, making you think he is doing you a massive favor by taking that heavy old piece of wood off your hands. Do not fall for this trap. That kid behind the counter is either completely clueless about firearms history, or he knows exactly what he is doing, and he is trying to rob you blind. The pre-1964 Winchester Model 70 is legendary in the firearms community. It is universally known across the globe as the rifleman's rifle for a very specific, undeniable reason. Before 1964, Winchester actually employed master craftsmen on the factory floor. These were men who painstakingly hand-fitted the steel parts. They built these rifles around a massive, solid forged steel receiver and a flawless controlled round feed action, utilizing a Moser-style claw extractor that is practically indestructible in the field. It was the absolute undisputed peak of American commercial gunsmithing. But then, the darkest year in Winchester's history arrived. In 1964, the corporate accountants took over the boardroom. They looked at the spreadsheets and realized that building a hunting rifle with that much hand-fitted forged steel was cutting far too deeply into their profit margins. So they completely gutted the manufacturing process. They cut corners everywhere they possibly could. They cheapened the design, they changed the legendary action, and they completely destroyed the soul of the rifle. The magic was instantly gone. That exact reason is why serious firearms collectors and professional dangerous game hunters will hunt down those pre-1964 models relentlessly. Modern manufacturers simply cannot afford to mass-produce a hunting rifle with that level of meticulous craftsmanship anymore unless they charge you outrageous custom shop prices. That scratched-up, heavy hunting rifle sitting in the back of your closet is a finite piece of irreplaceable American mechanical art. Its value is climbing higher with every passing year. Do not let some slick salesman convince you to trade away your grandfather's legacy for a cheap piece of injection molded plastic. Let us talk about number 5, the Heckler & Koch P7 series. If you happen to own one of these highly unique pistols, I can almost guarantee that at some point, some tactical snob at the local shooting range has tried to talk you into getting rid of it. Let us be brutally honest for a second. To the untrained eye, the P7 is a very strange-looking handgun. It is remarkably heavy for its compact size. The steel frame gets uncomfortably hot near the trigger guard if you shoot it rapidly. And of course, it features that highly unusual squeeze-cocking mechanism right there on the front strap of the grip. In a modern firearms world where everyone has been completely brainwashed into believing they desperately need a polymer-framed, optics-ready micro-compact that holds 15 rounds, the P7 looks like an overweight, outdated brick. I have heard countless horror stories of older guys taking their P7s to weekend gun shows and dumping them on a dealer's table just so they could finance a generic, mass-produced plastic 9mm and a cheap red dot sight. That is nothing short of a catastrophic financial tragedy. When you make a trade like that, you are handing away a true mechanical masterpiece in exchange for a piece of disposable, injection-molded plastic that loses value the second you walk out the front door. The Heckler & Koch P7 is the absolute pinnacle of Cold War-era German engineering. It utilizes a highly complex gas-delayed blowback operating system built with a level of metallurgy that is completely unmatched in today's commercial market. The fixed barrel makes it inherently more accurate than almost any modern combat pistol you can buy off the shelf. Heckler & Koch discontinued this magnificent pistol decades ago for one simple, frustrating reason. It simply cost way too much money and required way too much highly skilled European labor to manufacture. They will never make a gun like this again. The corporate bean counters simply will not allow it. What you are holding in your safe is not just a quirky old carry gun, it is a blue-chip financial investment. The collector's market for the P7 series, especially the highly coveted P7 M8 or the double-stack M13 variants, has completely left the stratosphere. We are talking thousands upon thousands of dollars for a gun in decent condition, and even more if you still have the original factory box and the matching test target. Holding on to a Heckler & Koch P7 right now is exactly like holding on to a solid gold bar that magically gets heavier and more valuable every single year. If you have one, ignore the mainstream tactical hype. Keep it cleaned, keep it oiled, and keep it locked up tight. Coming in at number 4 is a revolver that absolutely breaks my heart every time I see it sitting under the fluorescent lights of a cheap pawn shop display case. The original Colt Python, specifically the legendary models built between 1955 and 1999. Here is the hidden trap that is catching a lot of old school owners completely off guard right now. A few years ago, Colt finally answered the demands of the modern market and released a brand new, redesigned version of the Python. Suddenly, a massive wave of sheer panic hit the older guys who owned the originals. When they mistakenly believed that the market was about to be completely flooded with these new Pythons, and that their vintage originals were going to instantly crash in value, they rushed out to sell them, desperately trying to cash out to collectors or dealers before the bubble burst. That was a catastrophic, incredibly expensive mistake. The release of the new Python did not destroy the value of the original. In fact, it did the exact opposite. It proved to the entire world exactly why the original snake gun is completely untouchable. Do not get me wrong, the new ones are fine revolvers, but they are modern, CNC machine production guns, built for a modern profit margin. The original Colt Python was meticulously hand-fitted by absolute master gunsmiths. We are talking about dedicated craftsmen who spent decades on the Colt factory floor, painstakingly filing and polishing the internal lockwork by hand until the double-action trigger pull felt exactly like rolling a glass ball across a sheet of smooth ice. And do not even get me started on the finish. That legendary Colt Royal Blue is a completely lost art. It is a deep, mesmerizing, mirror-like finish that requires a highly toxic, incredibly labor-intensive polishing process. Modern environmental safety regulations and modern corporate budgets simply will not allow a company to replicate it today. When you hold an original Python, you are not holding a regular firearm. You are holding the absolute Rolex of American revolvers. The prices on these original, hand-built snake guns are doing absolutely nothing but going up. Watch, do not panic sell your family history just because a factory decided to reuse a famous name. Real quick, before we get into the top 3, which includes a rifle that the government literally banned from entering the country, I need to hear from you. We have all made deals at the gun counter that we desperately wish we could take back. Have you ever sold a gun for cheap, only to find out years later that it was worth an absolute fortune? Drop your biggest, most painful regret down in the comments right now. This community needs to hear your real-world stories so the younger guys do not make those same expensive mistakes. Let us warn them before they get burned. Number 3 on the list. Maya is a weapon that I see entirely too many young guys trading away without understanding the sheer magnitude of what they are actually holding in their hands. The original World War II era M1 Garand. Here is the exact tragic scenario that plays out in gun shops all across the country. A kid inherits his grandfather's M1 Garand. He takes it out to the local range, realizes it is incredibly heavy, it is long, it is clunky, and it only holds 8 rounds of .30-06. He looks over at the next lane, sees some guy running fast-paced tactical drills with a lightweight, modern AR-15 loaded with lasers and red dot optics. Suddenly, that historic piece of wood and steel feels completely useless to him. He takes it to a dealer and trades a piece of actual world history straight up for a basic entry level. Your mass-produced aluminum AR-15. That is a mistake that should literally keep you awake at night. For decades, the CMP sold these rifles to the American public at incredibly low prices. Because of that government pipeline, a very dangerous misconception was born. People assumed there was an endless, bottomless supply of M1 Garands sitting in dark government warehouses just waiting to be shipped out forever. Let me give you a harsh, real-world reality check right now. The well is running completely dry. Those massive wooden crates of surplus rifles are disappearing, and the golden days of picking up a historically accurate Gare, and for cheap, are dead. An original M1 Garand, especially one with correct, matching era parts from Springfield Armory or Winchester, is no longer just a firearm. It is a holy relic of American survival. The price tags on these rifles are surging upward at a terrifying rate. When you trade away an M1 Garand, you are not just losing an old gun, you are handing over a rapidly appreciating historical asset to a dealer who will turn around and flip it to a high-end collector for thousands of dollars. Keep it, oil it, pass it down to your kids. Coming in at number 2 is a rifle that proves exactly why you should never ever judge a firearm by its country of origin. The pre-bond Chinese AK-47, specifically the highly sought-after models imported by Norinco and Polytech. If you were around the gun community in the 1980s and early 1990s, you know exactly what the general attitude was back then. People looked at these rifles and laughed. The mainstream consensus was that Chinese guns were just cheap, communist junk. Gun stores literally had them stacked in wooden barrels by the front door, selling them for $200 to $300. Because they were practically giving them away, guys treated them like absolute trash. They would buy one, dump thousands of rounds of cheap, highly corrosive steel-cased ammo through it, never bother to clean it, and toss it in the mud. When they finally got bored, they sold them at pawn shops for $100 just to get them out of the safe. Then the federal government stepped in. The import bans of 1989 and 1994 slammed the door shut forever. Suddenly, those cheap Chinese rifles were federally banned from entering the United States. And when the supply vanished, the American gun community woke up to a very painful truth. Those early Norinco and Polytech rifles were not cheap junk. In fact, they were some of the most reliable, rugged, and beautifully manufactured AK-style rifles to ever touch American soil. The Polytech Legend, with its incredibly smooth, solid milled steel receiver, is now universally considered the absolute holy grail of AK collectors. The guys who sold these off for pocket change in 1993 are sick to their stomachs right now. Today, a pristine pre-bond Polytech or Norinco can easily command $3,000 to $4,000, and the ceiling just keeps rising every single year. If you have one of these sitting in the back of your safe, do not let anyone insult it. You are holding a legally banned masterpiece that is practically printing money. And finally, we have reached the moment you have been waiting for. Number 1. This is the exact gun I warned you about at the very beginning of this video. It is the firearm that completely shattered the market, fooled thousands of impulsive buyers, and is now standing tall as one of the most highly sought-after wheel guns on the entire planet. I am talking about the original Smith & Wesson Model 29, specifically the early vintage models featuring a pin barrel and a recessed cylinder. Let me take you on a quick trip back in time to 1971. A gritty police thriller hits the movie theaters called Dirty Harry, starring Clint Eastwood. He stares down a bank robber, points a massive, intimidating blued revolver right at his chest, and delivers the most famous line in cinema history, calling his weapon the most powerful handgun in the world. Almost overnight, absolute, unadulterated madness took over the American gun market. Every guy in the country ran out to their local gun store, slapped their hard-earned money on the glass counter, and aggressively demanded a Model 29 and 44 Magnum. The wait lists were literally years long. People were paying double or triple the retail price just to feel like Dirty Harry. But here is the massive hidden trap that absolutely nobody talks about today. Most of the guys who bought that gun on a whim had absolutely no business shooting a 44 Magnum. They took it to the local indoor range, confidently loaded up a cylinder of full power, heavy grain factory ammunition, pulled the trigger, and practically broke their wrists. The recoil was violent, punishing, and completely unmanageable for the average weekend shooter. So what did they do? The exact same thing thousands of other guys did. They took the gun home, shoved it in an old gym sock, threw it in the bottom of a dresser drawer, and forgot about it. Or worse, they dragged it straight down to the local pawn shop and sold it for a massive, embarrassing loss just to get rid of the pain. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Used gun display cases were literally overflowing with Model 29s that had only been fired exactly 6 times. Fast forward to today, and the market has flipped completely upside down. If you look at modern Smith & Wesson revolvers, they are built with internal locks mandated by corporate lawyers, and they are filled with cheap metal injection molded internal parts. They simply do not have the soul, the smoothness, or the sheer strength of the old guns. Those early Model 29s, the ones where the barrel is actually mechanically pinned to the frame and the cylinder chambers are recessed to perfectly enclose the cartridge case heads, are absolute mechanical royalty. The breathtaking, high-polish carbon steel finish, the painstakingly perfect hand timing of the cylinder, and the raw, unadulterated craftsmanship represent a golden era of Smith & Wesson that was permanently killed off by corporate cost-cutting. High-end collectors and serious investors are aggressively hunting down these pinned and recessed models. They are writing massive blank checks to get their hands on a pristine example, especially if you still have the original wooden presentation box. If you inherited a Model 29 from your father or your uncle who bought it in the 70s, fired one cylinder, and put it away, you are sitting on a staggering pile of cash. Do not let some dealer tell you it is just an old heavy revolver. Lock your safe, throw away the key, and let that investment grow. The harsh, undeniable reality of the modern firearms market is incredibly simple. Forged steel is eternal, and mass-produced plastic is completely disposable. History, heritage, and genuine master-level craftsmanship cannot be magically manufactured on a modern, computer-controlled assembly line. The guns we talked about today are not just tools anymore. They are finite, irreplaceable financial assets. Dragging them into a pawn shop and trading them away for quick cash is the absolute worst financial decision you can possibly make. Do not be the guy who gets robbed blind by a smiling salesman simply because he did not know what he actually had. If you want to stay ahead of the curve, protect your hard-earned assets, and ensure you never get ripped off at the used gun counter, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. And do me a massive favor. Share this video immediately with a friend or a family member who has an old safe full of inherited guns. You might just save them from blindly giving away their family inheritance for absolute pennies. Stay safe, stay sharp,